what's up, everybody? You know what time it is. Your boy Jeffrey L. Boney here for another hot edition of Real Talk Junkies Live. Man, as always, we encourage you to share the link with all your friends, your family, your foes, your enemies. It doesn't matter. Everybody needs to tune in on today. And of course, I want you to chime in and engage yourself in the chat with me. Always we welcome your conversations, your questions, your comments on this important topic, as we always encourage you to do. And of course, we want you to visit forwardtimes.com. Again, that's forwardtimes.com in order to check out the latest news about and for African Americans in the greater Houston area and across the globe. Also, I want you to encourage everybody to go visit my website, jeffreylboney.com. Again, that's jeffreylboney.com to pick up the latest book, Don't Argue With Me, a no-nonsense approach to the issues in the Black community. All right, we're going to get into it today. But before we do, I want to take a moment to share my sincere, humble condolences and prayers to the family of one of my mentors, definitely my political mentor and friend, former council member of Missouri City, Texas, Don Smith, who passed away peacefully in his sleep this morning. He was a stalwart in our community. He's the founder of the Missouri City Juneteenth Celebration Foundation. And 20 years before the Juneteenth became a federal holiday, we were celebrating Juneteenth in the city of Missouri City, Texas, because of this individual. He was a stalwart in our community. He was a committed council member, made a lot of progress. And of course, his legacy that he leaves with us is to continue to celebrate the Missouri City Juneteenth Celebration Foundation with all of the activities and events that are a part of MC Texas. So I'm just so emotional right now because I just spoke to him before his passing, man, for hours, and he one of the things he really wanted was for us to keep that legacy going, and we just at our past council meeting this past Monday, as a matter of fact, just solidified an agreement to continue to celebrate and support the Missouri City Juneteenth Celebration Foundation as a city for the next 5 years. And so, I know that his son shared that information with him and whispered it to him. And I know he was elated upon hearing it. And then we get the news that this morning he passed away peacefully in his sleep. So again, my condolences to one of my mentors and friend, former council member, Don Smith, friend to many and a servant to all. So God bless the family. And let's get right into the conversation today. I have two individuals who have been following and actively engaged and involved with a case that hit our scenes, not only from a local perspective, but from a national perspective. It gained a lot of national attention. And it's something that I've been covering in the Forward Times since it actually happened. Talking about the case of Pamela Turner. She was murdered, brutally murdered, in my opinion, by Baytown officer De La Cruz at her apartment complex. If you saw the video, because it was definitely captured on video, you see that this African-American female woman was trying to escape his clutches. He confronted her allegedly for some warrants, and she ended up having this encounter with him, and it costed her her life. He, as you see him, after tasing her, steps back after the tussling takes place, and you see him brutally shoot her multiple times and eventually kills her. And all of this is caught on camera. To start, you see that Harris County District Attorney's offices, they finally presented evidence to a grand jury. That grand jury made sure that he was indicted, but he was only indicted for aggravated assault. But even with that, that would have carried a hefty penalty if he was convicted and if the judge or jury allowed him to be sentenced, but he didn't even get sentenced. He didn't get convicted. He was found not guilty recently. And two individuals that were following the case, covering the case, even at the courtroom, here to talk to us today about the details of that case and also some other important matters to the African American community. But I want to call in both my guests today. First is the national chair of the National Black United Front, none other than my homeboy, Mr. Kofi Taharka. Let's give it up for Kofi. Anyway, thanks for welcome to Real Talk Junkies. And also, y'all, joining me today is a community activist who's been in the streets for a long time, just like Kofi. He's currently serving as the Houston branch of the NAACP's president. And I'm talking about none other than Mr. Bishop, Dr. James Dixon. Let's give it up for James Dixon. All right, welcome to Real Talk Junkies. All right, Kofi, I want to jump in and start with you on this matter because you were at the courtroom practically every day, if not all day. Let's talk about the atmosphere in the courthouse. And I know there's a lot of things that I know Bishop Dixon alluded to in a press conference, but tell us about what was going down at the courtroom that you witnessed that was problematic or that was eye-opening.
First, thank you so much for inviting us. It's always a pleasure to be a guest on Real Talk Junkies.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the National Black United Front, from our perspective, we always approach these cases from at least two perspectives. One is the long lens of history, right? You can't just look at the Pamela Turner case without looking at the history of oppression of African people, Black people, people of African ancestry in this country. Second is understanding that we're operating in a system based on global white supremacy and racism. So the Harris County Courthouse and what happened in the Pamela Turner trial is part and parcel of that system. It is not broken. It doesn't need to be fixed. It's operating as it was designed to operate. So when we went down to the courthouse every day, not all day, Brother Jeff, but we were there a good portion of the time. It's a very difficult, you should say, we extend solidarity to her family because she's a human being, a Black woman, a sister who was gunned down like less than a dog. If you saw that video. So sitting there in that courtroom, our first obligation was to provide whatever level of support we could for the family, for her daughter, for her sister, who we've remained in contact for this long 3 years that they waited to see whether they could get a small amount of justice. All hell broke loose down there one day at the courtroom, brother.
Tell us about it.
The prosecution was attempting to show the body camera video, not the bystander video that the world saw. The body camera video
from Dela Cruz.
From Dela Cruz again, so that people could see what he did. And the defense objected to showing that video again because I think they knew how damaging it would be to the jury. They had already shown it the day before. I didn't see it, but this was my first time seeing it. So one of the family, there was an objection. There was a little, a little back and forth going, and one of the family members said something, and the judge overreacted and jumped up and said, "We're going to have order in our courtroom, and he's entitled to a fair trial." So that lets you know what this lame duck judge was thinking. He said, he's entitled to a fair trial. And all of the sheriff's deputies came out in force, and it was all, we got to have order in our court. And he just said something, it wasn't real loud, but he said something. And then he told one of the deputies, as I recall, he said, "That's what happened, bro." So prosecution, the family wanted the video to be shown again, as difficult as it was. The defense objected to it. And they cleared the courtroom, sent the jury out, cleared the courtroom. It was all kind of drama. There was like a SWAT team that came up into the hallway and so forth and so on. And that particular family member that was there, they were in the hallway in tears. They wanted the family to sit there like robots and watch the murder of our sister. So then, so then that kind of got settled down. We're back in the courtroom again. And I forget what was. There may have been someone on the witness stand because they ultimately did show the body camera video
again.
Yes, you know, the first time that day, but they had shown it the day before.
I'm saying, but they didn't want to show it at first.
Well, the
for the second time, right? But they ended up showing it the second time.
They did,
right.
They did show it, and all of a sudden the judge jumped up and said, "That's a judicial threat." Ordered the jury out of the courtroom again and walked out, and everybody was like, like what's going on? And allegedly, someone who was a part of people that were there in support of the family was in the window with a TV camera shoot and just shook their head. Took that as threat. Right. Also, let me say this: is that the judge said.
Now, hold on. Who is this judge?
183, Judge Silverman. My understanding is that he lost in the primary. It's the one, whoever the judge is, 183.
No, it wasn't Chuck Silverman.
Yes.
It was Chuck Silverman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the judge who lost, this was the issue with that. What I'm hearing is because the judge lost
in the primary,
there is some bitterness. There seemed to be some negative emotion carrying over from the loss and from the defeat. Yeah. And but
that's what was being. That was what was being said down here. Definitely court 183, almost 90.
Yeah. So okay. So we'll get the name.
Let me say this, Jeff, is that on the first occasion, as the judge was saying, if you can't control yourself in my courtroom, this and that, you can't be here. And the whole family, all of the activists that were there in support walked out. Sister, daughter, anybody that was there, because there was a high level of frustration for them throughout the trial and seeing things that were not able to be admitted. Again, this is their mother, their sister, the mother of their children, a real people. So
it's something
it was a lot of drama.
It's something you said at the beginning of your conversation, Kofi, and I'll get to you in just a second, Bishop Dixon, because I know you held a press conference in front of you guys' offices, the NAACP Houston branch. But you said something about this system is designed the way it was intended to work. Working the way it was designed to work. And so in hearing you say that this judge was seemingly, I guess, in alignment with the defense, we oftentimes talk about the importance of having certain types of judges in the seat. So in this case, this judge was a Republican judge?
No.
This is a Democrat judge. So it didn't matter the political affiliation. They were still operating in the system that was designed. Is that what I'm hearing you say, Brother Cole?
Absolutely. I mean, there's 10 to 15,000 people down here at the Harris County Jail. They're making money. They say crime doesn't pay. Well, we say in the National Black United Front, yeah, it pays. It pays the lawyers, the police, the people who do the contracts, the build, the jails, prisons, the phone companies that we got to pay to talk to our loved ones, the food contracts, the little small towns that people are locked up in. So it's an industry.
Yeah.
That's built. I don't even want to go back to the Sugarland 95 because we see a start of the modern industry coming out of the enslavement process.
Yeah, convict labor. So Bishop Dixon, you held a press conference, the NAACP did, and you all had some pretty interesting things that you shared that were not allowed, I think, by the judge in the proceedings. Can you speak on some of those things? Because I think that the people that just look at news clips, sound bites, don't really know the backstory on some of the things that actually took place in the court. Can you speak on some of those things?
Well, first again, thank you again for having us on. And always great to be in the room with Brother Kofi. Yeah. His righteous indignation keeps us on point. and his intellectual thought process as it relates to dealing with social justice is powerful. Thank you, Brother Kofi, for your commitment. I want to say that with emphasis, I too say that the system is not a broken system. It is functioning precisely the way it was designed. It's difficult to even blame the people who inherit the system because it's a system that was designed before any of us got here, that we're still trying to figure out what to do about it because we still have to face that same system every day. Brothers and sisters are facing that system every day. And I want to emphasize that because when we stop paying attention to it, we're feeding sheep to the slaughter on a daily basis in our nation and in our county. In this particular instance, Brother Jeff, there was evidence that the judge did not allow to be heard. For example, the fact that De La Cruz lived in the same complex with Pamela Turner, the fact that he knew her, he was aware of her mental illness.
When you say that was not allowed, what do you mean?
That the defense was not allowed to present that before the jury. The prosecutor
was not allowed to let the jury know
that De La Cruz
actually lived in the same complex.
Lived in the complex and knew her and was aware of her mental condition. The fact that he had been in communication with her sister prior to this incident was not allowed to be admitted. Several instances where the prosecutor was attempting to establish the fact that De La Cruz had a history with Pamela Turner. This was not just a random meet situation. Because to have done that would have perhaps given the jury the understanding and the insight to know that if a police officer had these facts already as a part of his understanding, he should have been taking other steps. Because if you know that this is a mental illness case, you deal with that appropriately. She never received the kind of treatment and the kind of service that someone in her circumstance deserves to receive. That and the police department has that availability, has that resource, but it was never deployed, never called upon. Those are the kind of facts that were not admitted in this trial, which skewed the jury's perspective. And I can tell you.
So without having that introduced, what you're saying is that they kind of looked at it as a random meet, that he just saw her, they had this confrontation, it was just the first meeting of these two individuals ever in life.
Right, and of course it's known that she had some type of warrant, but what people don't know is that was a misdemeanor warrant. Is the first thing. Secondly, he is off duty living on the property. This doesn't even cover his purview.
Explain that.
Meaning that he was not sent by the police department to serve a warrant.
So a warrant was out on her. Misdemeanor warrant was out on her, but he wasn't tasked or issued the assignment to go and issue that warrant to her or bring her in because of that warrant.
For free.
Do security at the complex.
Off-duty security. Off-duty security at the complex. Right. So I mean, those factors give you
and none of that was introduced or allowed to be introduced.
And that's what the judge put up stop signs multiple times to the prosecutor's argument and presentation of evidence. But let's get down to this part, because Brother Kofi hit the nail on the head. This sister was shot down less than a rabid dog would be shot. She's on the ground with no weapon. She is without arms. She is on the ground facing him. Hands are visible. He's standing a safe distance away and fires 5 rounds at this woman, she does not have a weapon. She is no threat to himself or anyone else. And he fires 5 shots at her, hits her 3 times, and kills her. Now, listen, if you put a police officer on the ground and a civilian, not to mention an African American, firing 5 rounds at an unarmed police officer, where do you think you or I would be today?
On death row. You'd be on death row. More than likely. Yeah. He tried to get away.
They showed
Yeah.
They showed the apartment complex video, the
Yeah.
body camera video, and the bystander video.
Yeah.
When she saw that car, she tried to run away. When he shot and killed her, she said something to the effect of,
I'm pregnant.
well, yeah, that was one thing.
What
She
then?
said, why are you harassing me?
Why?
I'm trying to go home. I'm pregnant, saying anything.
Anything
Now,
to,
the defense for the officer, this is what they say, that she got a hold of his taser and tased him.
But it had already been deployed.
However, you can what they call dry stun tase someone. So that's like, it's deployed, but then just like you have a zapper, you can hit someone. So that was the allegation that she had gotten a hold to his taser and tased him. However, the only information that I'm aware of that was presented was that's what he said. There wasn't physical evidence. There wasn't
to the fact.
To whether there was a fact, whether that was a fact or not that he was tased. But as you know, as we say, irregardless, irregardless of the situation, as Bishop Dixon has said, you know this person. You know that this person has some mental challenges, and this winds up in the execution style murder of her because of the way it is that you approached and dealt with the situation with this sister Pamela Turner. And let me say this from the National Black United Front's perspective also, is that justice in Pamela Turner's case, in all of these other cases, is not solely if someone gets convicted or goes to jail or what have you. Justice or living in a just society is that we don't get killed like this
In the first place.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That we don't, the defense attorney, they smeared her name, brother. They thought that you would have thought she was John Dillinger, Al Capone, and Frank Nitti, and everybody else.
What were they saying?
They talked about, as Bishop Dixon said, the warrant, the misdemeanor warrants that she had, that these, they played it up like she was not a grandmother who was really physically no threat to this trained police officer. But they did their normal thing. They tried to make the victim the villain.
Yeah, it's villainizing the victim in order to sanctify the murderer and to justify the crime. And we've seen that how many times, Brother Kofi? We can't count the number of times. It was the attempt in Georgia to paint Ahmaud Arbery into this black man who was a violent threat, and had we not gotten that video, if someone had not released, we would still have that picture. Remember the George Floyd case?
Right.
The initial police report was that George Floyd was the villain in that circumstance, and evidence came out because of a video that was not, and the police had filed that bogus report.
Right.
And I think it's important for the public to know that we're not anti-police.
Right.
And we still have to keep saying that, because every time you talk about one of these cases where a police officer has violated someone's human rights and gotten away with it, it's like, hell, why are those black people raising hell about police again? Well, it's because Pamela Turner is dead.
Yes.
Shot at 5 times, hit 3 times, unarmed by an officer who knew her condition, could have called a special team to deal with the case if that was necessary, but did not chose, he chose to shoot her. The same happened with George Floyd. The same happened with the Neil Neck. The same happened with Ahmaud Arbery. It happens over and over again and it's an epidemic. We've got to, at some point, call it what it is. And I'm still waiting to see when are leaders other than African Americans and Latino Americans going to start standing up for justice in our county, in our state, in our nation. Because we're not the only one who have access to this information and to this evidence.
Yeah, and I would venture to say that even with the whole Latino, voice, especially with what we see out in L.A. taking place with the council members out there and the union leader, that's not always
reliable, huh?
Yeah, well, we don't always get that level of support.
Yeah.
From the Latino community, let alone the Caucasians and Asian community. But I wanted to speak on. I wrote a piece some time ago, kind of analyzing the trends of what I was seeing, Brother Kofi and Brother Dixon, relative. The article is entitled "Blood Money for Black Lives," and I wrote that piece talking about the trend of not getting convictions for the crimes that these officers, these law enforcement officials are committing, by them either not even getting indicted in the first place by a grand jury or by the DAs, and walking scot-free in the case of Dela Cruz and many, many others. And I talked about how, though, after those individuals are not indicted or are not convicted and walk free, civil suits are filed. And yet cities, municipalities, what's the case out in Oakland, California, with the young man who was killed at the subway, Oscar Grant.
Yeah.
All of these municipalities, these entities with taxpayer dollars have extended settlements with these particular families in most cases. The young man out in Cleveland, Ohio, with the 12-year-old, Rice, and many, many, many others.
Many more.
And they are receiving these settlement dollars, which is why I started, compiling a list of details and dollar amounts, most of which are in the millions and millions of dollars, of where cities settle cases all the time. Some of them are high profile, like this particular instance with what we're talking about, Pamela Turner and many others, Sandra Bland, whatever. And some of them are low key, maybe $100,000, $50,000, $75,000, or whatever. And it's an interesting dynamic that you can be found guilty, or I guess when you settle, that means that you're saying, I'm not going to fight this. That somehow, somewhere, there may be some negligence on our part, or that had been committed, whereby we're just going to settle.
There's no admission.
There's no admission
of guilt, right?
Right.
But what are y'all thoughts on that? Start with you, Bishop.
Well, let me say that the admission of guilt obviously would trigger a completely different outcome from a judicial perspective. The fact that, you go to trial with a case expecting and wanting justice. And as Brother Kofi said, justice will begin with the incident not happening in the first place. But when your case goes to court, and let's face it, Pamela Turner was not the one who should have been on trial.
Right.
It was Juan de la Cruz.
Yeah.
And there's something wrong even with our vernacular. I caught myself the other day saying, I'm calling it the Pamela Turner case. Well, this is the Juan de la Cruz issue, right? If I get indicted for some crime, or that's James Dixon on trial. We're calling it the Pamela Turner case. If the emphasis should be on Juan de la Cruz. What's his police record? What's his background? What kind of issues does he have? And when you look at his record as a police officer, it's not pretty. He's got other issues of infractions on his record that if the jury had been looking at him squarely, rather than trying to figure out if Pamela Turner he's the one on trial. She's dead. Yes. But we treat it as if the victim is the one on trial. I need to say that. Yeah. Coming to your point. I'm not saying we don't need to know who she is. We do. She's a person, human being. But Juan de la Cruz committed the act. he was the one to be on trial.
Yeah.
And no one knows much about him.
Nothing. Other than he got reinstated to his job. On the day that she was being buried.
That's okay. That's my point. Now, get into the civil issue. Proving a civil case is different than proving a criminal case. Now, that's always been hairy for me, right? It's always been hairy for me. But I do know that no amount of money brings back a loved one.
Right.
No amount of money rights the wrong done to someone who loses their life or is seriously injured. How those cases are settled and why, I think is the question that you're scratching at, right?
Yeah.
I think there needs to be some discussion and some debate around it. But man, think about it if they didn't get that. You know, often children are left behind to deal with the aftermath. What do they do? So there is some justification for a civil settlement. But the issue is in the civil court, of course, you're not dealing with the criminal act of guilt.
But Kofi, I mean, it's almost as if though, you have people that are like, well, hell, you're getting $2 million. Why are you still complaining? What's the problem? We gave you $10 million. We gave you $800,000. You should just be happy with that. You could have got nothing.
Well, I'll go back to my statement that look at the system that we're operating.
Mm-hmm.
And again, National Black United Front's position is work study action around this is that we're operating a system of global white supremacy, racism. That is the overall value system. So then the institutions within that system operate with those goals because there are many parts to it. We look at why does this happen and why does it continue to happen. The money part for the families is I guess an end part. I couldn't say to a family what you should do or what you should not do relative to the money part. But let's look at the police union, how strong they are in protecting police officers and laws being on the books that stand in the way of people even getting prosecuted and so forth. Let's look at the political structure and those who protect the political structure or try to play both sides against the middle. One minute we're saying we're for victims, another minute we're saying, waving the flag with law enforcement. When we delve into this, on another case, some people who were behind the curtain, as I say, so to say, when the police unions are negotiating their contracts on a local level with the state legislature, that's a very important part of why we haven't even gotten some modest reform.
Right.
Modest reform. Because quite frankly, Brother Jeff, grassroots activists, organizers like the National Black United Front and many others and ones who have come before us have told us some of the things that need to happen that could help prevent some of this. And I'm saying those are reforms. Those aren't even totally what needs to happen. Civilian Review Board with subpoena power. That's another thing that happened in this case. Texas Rangers. We stand up and say, we want the Texas Rangers to investigate. For what? Who really has faith in our community in the Texas Rangers investigation? There were New York Times articles, there's Reuters articles from over the past several years talking about the contradiction of the Texas Rangers investigating other law enforcement agencies. The fox can't guard the hen house. This is common sense. Another thing in this case that they were saying is it's kind of like Rodney King, right? Don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe what it is that you see. Don't believe that this is a small lady who is trying to just run away from him and get out of the situation.
Don't believe it.
And what happened. Don't believe that because the trial was a lot about the battle of experts, quote unquote, use of force experts. What was it right? What was his reaction time? What is the standard?
Did he feel threatened? Did he feel threatened? That's the piece right there.
Did he feel police officer do in a circumstance like this? And what we're saying, brother, is that all of that is way out of kilter with valuing Black people, people of African ancestry's lives. And there is at least a 400 to 500-year history of the same thing in many different forms.
So where do we go from here? So
we got to change, brother. I'm glad you asked that question because that's what's on my spirit. We got to change.
We being who?
We, Black folks, people of African ancestry, African people, people in our community, people who are subject to this system, whether they be poor people, whether they be indigenous people, we have to change. We got to change what our value system is because, see, we're in a society, Jeff, as you know, that something trending today and it's gone tomorrow.
Yeah. 4 days.
In order to build sustainable communities where we can minimize the police interaction, if not get rid of it altogether, or organize ourselves and mobilize ourselves, then we got to change. We got to cut the TV off. Not your show. But we got to cut the TV off. We got to teach our children our true history and culture. We got to have a proper foundation. We got to build defense mechanisms within our own community that help to deal with situations like this. We got to really, I believe that with 1,000% of my heart. And that's for all of us. But sometimes it's a challenge change because we happy, or we seem to be happy in some situations like this. We want to, medicate ourselves out of this reality or these realities that we face. We want to put on trinkets and drive big cars and live in big mansions and all of those things, which is fine if that's what you want to do.
Smoke cigars, drink.
Whatever it is. But that's what
not you, bitch.
Is and we got to be willing to learn too.
Yeah.
No matter how long we've been in the fight, learn and say, you know what? We got to change. Kofi, you got to grow. You got to build. You got to learn more. You got to do more. Because it's one hell of a feeling, brother, to sit there with her family and look at that video as a man, as a brother.
Yeah.
To look at that and see the murder of one of our sisters. And then ask the question, you say, where do we go from here? So what do we do? There are only certain things I'm going to say on your show, bro, but that's a hell of a thing, brother, to sit through. So I say, again, that it's a wholesale evaluation. Some things have worked in the past, some things work, but we got to be a highly politically, historically, and culturally educated community, because then we won't go for the BS when it comes in our face, whether it's in the political arena, the social arena, the cultural or the spiritual arena, so that we can be
or judicial
arena, but a very self-determining people. See, when people have a sense of their self and they're organized properly, you find a lot of times things like this don't happen as much to those groups. Why? Because there are consequences on various levels that people know. Don't mess with them, because they got all levels of organization and their consequences for it.
Bishop Dixon, where do we go?
Well, let me just say that was very well stated. I think we've got to, first of all, eliminate the lesser things that divide us in order to focus on the major things that should unite us. Because you cannot organize people that are ostracized from each other by sometimes even imagined barriers and dividers. The psychological job that oppression has done on African Americans in this country is beyond anything we can really explain. That the self-hate and the distrust, it's mammoth. We got to get over that. We have to dialogue more off camera and be able to iron have to sharpen iron so that we can come to, all right, now, how do we work together in an organized fashion to address a system that continues to devalue our humanity, degrade, and divide us? It's very important. Then secondly, I think we have to challenge people who should be responsible for justice in our community to show up and speak up about it. When I think about, again, we're in the so-called Bible Belt. We have not organized to demand an answer from the white evangelical community. The people who help elect people to office, and those who preach every Sunday that we are, all Christians, we're all God's children, we're all created by God. In a nation like this, when you think about the civil rights movement, what began to turn it was when others who were not African American began to speak out against the oppression. We don't see that today.
Well, we see it. We see it on the opposite end, though. Ed Young.
Well, yes, going the opposite direction. but I'm saying we're organizing right now a response from the NAACP that we're going to invite all activists to be a part of, because we've got to go public with our anger and demand an answer. Here's a woman shot dead in the streets. What's your response? What is your response? And say to the church, say to leaders, Black, white, brown, Democrat, Republican, what's your response to this? And as Brother Kofi said, there's got to be some consequences in organized fashion when those things happen and they go unaddressed. And Don's have the time to talk about strategy, but if there's no cost or no consequence, then that's not going to be any concern.
So, I mean,
the system is not working against them. It's working against us.
So, I moderated, as you know, Bishop, you were on the panel discussion on George Floyd, his birthday over at Tom Bass Park on criminal justice reform. And a part of that discussion included law enforcement and things of that nature. But, one of the things that we talked about was the need for alignment amongst the various organizations that are out here who are saying either the same things or wanting the same end goal. However, there's some misalignment potentially that has been in place. Some of that deliberate, some of that, probably just unintentional, just trying to figure out how to make it happen. Kofi, I know NBUF has been not only here in Houston under your leadership, but also across the country under your leadership, as well as the national chair. How do we get to alignment with these various organizations that have been created, past or present, try to address these issues that we continuously seemingly are talking about?
It's a challenge. You said that you want to go to the same goal. Well, through our work, sometimes that may be true and sometimes that's not. Some people may have different goals. You just got to be real about that. In order to build functional unity, or as operated here, the operational unity, then at least we got to be going in the same direction. Like, you can't be trying to go to San Antonio and I'm trying to go to Dallas.
It ain't gonna work.
Just because we look alike, just because we say that we're, looking at two different things. Then also, there has to be, from our perspective, a certain level of critical analysis and what I call movement maturity. So understand, okay, I might agree with you on 50% of what it is you got to say. Can we unite around that 50% of what it is that we agree upon? Can we build maybe coalition around issues? Because our overall goals and objectives and worldview and analysis may be
they'll never match.
They don't have to.
They may not be. That might not be a reality for us. So those are some of the things based on our experience in the National Black United Front. But as you said, historically and currently, one of the things also in our Constitution is that we do recognize that no one group speaks for the whole or the entirety of our community. That there are various, segments with various views. What I'm saying is that given the internal state, given the external state, we all have to do self-analysis, self-reflection, and do some changing in how we approach these various issues, including police terrorism, misconduct, and brutality as one part of what it is that we see that needs to be changed. And hell, if some of these organizations, if our organizations are not meeting the needs of the people can create others.
But you know what tends to happen is, what I've noticed tends to happen is when a group falls short of the expectations of others that they're either a part of or not a part of, they tend to publicly vilify that organization, tear that organization down or those individual leaders down, and then try to start their own thing. And you're already starting at the level of division.
You're spinning already. You're spinning the spinners, and we become a lot less effective. I think what Brother Kofi said is important. We've got to be honest about the fact that we don't agree on everything. But if we can coalesce around issues and that we have in common, that's pretty lofty stuff. But that's maturity. You know, that is maturity. I know that two individuals in the same room are not going to see everything the same. You get five, you're going to have five different perspectives. But do we agree we're going to Dallas? And if he says we're going by car and I say I'm going by train or we're going by motorcycle, then all right, then, but we're still all going to Dallas. So we know north is the direction we're going. Anybody going south, we know we write them off because they ain't going to Dallas. We're trying to right wrongs in a system that's been broken for 40 years. To stop Black folk and others from being shot down and killed by police without there being any ramifications. So there are a few things that we got to do to make that happen. We know qualified immunity is a problem, right?
Supreme Court just decided on not hearing that, by the way.
Exactly. But I'm saying we're not united in our response to that. Or we're not even united with a list of demands that we're not willing to negotiate on. There ought to be some things that we have discussed that we say, okay, these are things we agree on, and we're going to relentlessly pursue these objectives until change comes. And here are action steps that we will take. Now, some steps we might not be willing to take that he'll take, or vice versa. Or our approach may be this, or his is that. But at least now there's mutual respect. And to the point that you finally made, it is asinine and it is really counterproductive to tear down another organization because they don't embrace your methodology. In fact, even if as long as they're not doing any harm, leave them alone. But if I can learn to respect your methodology being different from mine and respect the fact that your motive is the same, it is about the wholesome existence of Black people in a nation where we've been treated like chattel, like animals, like objects, and now we're trying to right that. I respect you for wanting that same goal because that's what I'm after as well.
Yeah. You know, I think about, you know, the situations of old, dealing with people of African descent. And, you know, you think about the goals, the issues that were tackled. There were people who came together because lynching was a problem. And they was like, we don't want our African-American people to be kidnapped and lynched. That was an issue that the majority of those individuals came together to agree on, such as Richard Allen, who founded AME Church, and many others. And they used the Black press at the time. They used the Black church and Black leadership to come together to address the Ida B. Wells, the issues of lynching. Several of her friends and associates were lynched. And so she used her platform as a public speaker as well as a journalist to highlight these issues. So there was a unification around that issue that this is a problem and we want to address it. Was everybody 100% on board? More than likely not. But you had enough individuals that were shining the light on that issue and coming together to address that issue, whether it was coming out of slavery, going through Reconstruction, even into the Civil Rights movement. You think about the Montgomery bus boycott, whereas you had a select few individuals at the AME church in Montgomery, and about 13, 14 people coming together with a strategy because they wanted to change the public system of segregation as it relates to transportation. So they came together for that particular issue to address it. And as a whole, everybody benefit. So I think that sometimes we try to get the masses or the majority or 100% of the folks to agree. And we lose out on time and effort, I sometimes believe, because we're majoring in the money.
Go with the goers.
Well, I think that the history is this, that the forces that oppose any level of progress, they will marginalize, they will incarcerate people in the form of political prisoners, prisoners of war. They will have straight up assassinated people.
Straight up.
So when we talk about the 60s era, we're not just talking about like the civil rights, the Martin Luther King, I have a dream part, and that's a limited depiction of
it's a skewed narrative too.
We're talking about a wide breadth movement from grassroots. Now, see, we coming more, while we have a respect for it, we coming more out of that Black Power wing of that movement. And they had their differences, and some of them reached public disagreement. But I think the thing that we have to be clear on is, are you operating principally in the intentions of what you're doing, principle, or are you operating as a buffer or a behind the back buffer for any real progress? See, that's where some of the challenges come in. And it's not just, oh, look at them two fighting. It's how are people actually operating? How are groups operating? And it is not our general position to give public critique of other groups. However, it's not off the table, because there comes a point, not out of emotion, not out of somebody, I just don't like you.
Hey,
and we might have to give some public critique of each other, because people need to be held to account, no matter whether they say they're in a particular group that's supposed to be representing us or not. And we've seen that happen, and it's been sometimes destructive, sometimes insightful to us as a people. So, again, we looking at the long lens of history. There have been plenty of mistakes that have been made, but there are some things that have been successful. And a lot of times within the mainstream, many of the grassroots, many of the people who really put their life on the line, put their life in jeopardy. I went to Selma, Alabama, right? That was 20 years ago. I went there, and see, I was able to talk to people that was actually did the march there. And there was a lot of different groups that were there that could tell you about what happened. I was in the Brown Chapter with the organizers, met the SNCC people, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee people. And one of the things, well, I'm not going to tell that story, but anyway, I'm just saying we gotta embrace all wings of our
and understand that criticism coming from a perspective of honesty and integrity has the potential of refining and making you better. And if brothers, that's what that iron has to sharpen iron. You can't bring wood to that conversation, because you won't last. Like, I know if I'm gonna talk to Brother Kofi straight up and say, be honest with me, I gotta be prepared for Brother Kofi to talk to me straight. Because you already know he's not gonna make you feel good about yourself, just make you feel good. That ain't the deal. But if he criticizes a methodology or a strategy, I got to be willing to take that, right? And vice versa. If we're going to all get better, I don't think we dialogue enough. I don't. And I think sometimes we reach conclusions and assumptions about a group or an individual without ever having a conversation and direct. Now, I'm a Bible guy, and my scripture says, if you have an offense to a brother, go to him, right? To have that conversation. Hey, bro, this is what I observed. This is what I heard, what I'm saying. Now, let me give it to you straight. you can come back at me and tell me, am I reading this right or wrong? So we can iron out what the differences is and keep moving toward the objective and the goal of liberating our people. Because it does take all and many groups. No one group can do that. You know, it's impossible. Our struggle is too big. The final thing is, we've got too many of us who have graduated from the struggle because we've been compensated out of the struggle. And so you got brothers and sisters who don't even feel like this is their fight, but they benefited from the fight.
I call them beneficiaries of the civil rights struggle.
Yeah, they benefited from the fight, right? And now that they benefited from the fight, they have now eliminated themselves from the fight because they're doing well enough individually for the day-to-day realities of most brothers and sisters not to affect them.
Well, one way we could probably talk about unification, come together, we celebrate our blackness is that you guys have, and Brother Kofi, speak on Sankofa.
Yeah, how much time we got?
A few minutes, man.
Just a few minutes. Yeah, we just had it this past weekend, 25 years spiritual, historical, cultural activity. We had our one original Black Panthers, political exiles, Charlotte Hill O'Neill, Professor James Small was here from out of town. We actually had 4 different activities that we want to say publicly thank you to all of those who supported us in that, and it's very fulfilling. I'm still on that vibration, as they like to say, from this past Saturday. So it was great.
Awesome, man. Well, you know, we definitely want to continue to hear more about the works, because you guys do a lot in NBUF, feeding the hood, and you know, provide necessary resources.
We got a Buy Black Market, community garden. We got a lot of stuff going on.
And to see it's stuff like that we all need to highlight. NAACP, of course, we know you guys are actively involved in the community. We got to figure out ways in which we could just have some alignment on some key issues that we can all get behind, man, and see to fruition. And you know, the only way to bring about change, man, is if we have change agents that are making that happen, man. And so I appreciate you, Black Guerrilla Media.
That's right. BGM was down there at that courthouse, brother. It was tough, though.
Yeah, I know it was, man. And thank y'all for being Johnny on the spot, man, and being ever present and supportive with the family. Let's continue to figure out ways in which we can bring attention to this tragedy and how we can actually bring accountability and justice for that family and many others. All right.
Thank you for having us, brother Jeff. And I'm going to hit you back up to talk about the book of Balakata story of O'Shea. Some young brothers are committed to do a movie and a film that speaks to the issue we're talking about right now that's going to be powerful and amazing on the big screen.
All right, y'all. Hey, you know,
right
you heard it right here, y'all. I want to thank my 2 guests, Brother Kofi Taharka, Bishop Dr. James Dixon, and want to encourage you all to check out the show, share the link, and of course, tune in to Real Talk Junkies on our next show on next week, y'all. You know how we do it. Let's go.